Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
Limits don't arrive like iron gates blocking your path. They creep in silently, stitched into your habits, disguised inside your language. I'm not that type of person. I was never good at this. This is just who I am. They sound innocent. They sound factual. But every time you speak them, you lay another brick around yourself, another wall, another ceiling. And if you repeat those phrases long enough, you don't just build a prison, you become its most loyal guard. Limits survive because you protect them. You excuse them. You defend them against the very part of yourself that wants to rise. You think breaking limits requires heroic energy, a battle cry, a lightning strike of motivation. It doesn't. It requires betrayal. You have to betray the version of yourself who made peace with staying small. You have to become a traitor to your comfort. You have to wake up in the middle of that comfortable life and burn it down with one brutal act of defiance: movement. It won't feel victorious at first. It'll feel wrong. It'll feel like self-destruction. And it is of the self that could have lived and died without ever tasting their real power. The mind is a master of survival, not excellence. It doesn't care about your dreams. It cares about minimizing discomfort. It builds barriers not to harm you, but to protect you from fear, from failure, from embarrassment. But survival mechanisms are blunt tools. They don't distinguish between real danger and the sting of hard work. So you have to override the wiring. You have to recognize that the impulse to pull back is not a signal to obey. It's a call to advance. Every limit feels real when you first touch it. It's made of all your previous exits. And the only way to make it dissolve is to walk through it. Understand this. Every limit you've ever respected was taught to you by experience, by failure, by opinions you mistook as facts. None of them were laws. They were agreements, silent contracts you signed in moments of doubt. And contracts can be broken. You do it not by negotiating, not by explaining, but by acting. By acting while afraid, by acting while unready, by acting when every voice inside you screams to stay still. Movement tears the contract in half. Momentum burns it to ash. The man who breaks limits understands something the average man never will. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is proof that you're at the border of your current reality. It's a flare from the edge of your known world. It says, beyond this point, you will no longer be who you were. And that terror, that hesitation, it's sacred. It's the price of evolution. Most run from that feeling. They call it anxiety. They call it danger. But the few, the rare few, they lean in. They step forward when stepping back would feel so much safer. And in that step, the limit cracks. You think the limit will scream as it breaks. It doesn't. It shatters silently. No fanfare, no parade, just you standing on the other side of something you thought was impossible 15 minutes ago. And once you cross once, the mind can never fully go back. It has seen the falsehood of its own walls. It has tasted the lie. And now it must reconfigure reality. Every future limit will arrive weaker, thinner, easier to see through. Because you did the unthinkable, you proved yourself wrong. Breaking limits is not a one-time event. It's a habit, a hunger, a philosophy. The man who truly masters it doesn't wait for favorable conditions. He manufactures chaos. He seeks resistance. He moves toward the hard thing not because he's reckless, but because he understands that the faster you find your edge, the faster you erase it. Comfort slows this cycle. Discomfort accelerates it. And he would rather live in the furnace of growth than the coffin of ease. There's a reason why most men talk about potential but never live it. Because potential requires betrayal too. Betrayal of the life you built around excuses. Betrayal of the beliefs that kept you protected but powerless. Betrayal of the cheap pride that comes from playing games you already know you can win. True growth feels like abandonment. It feels like leaving a version of yourself to die. Because that's exactly what it is. And the sooner you stop grieving that death, the faster you start building something worthy of your blood. No one will anoint you as limit breaker. No one will hand you the sword. You must forge it yourself in the furnace of voluntary difficulty, under the hammer of daily discipline, cooled in the waters of relentless reflection. And when you swing it, when you slice through the invisible walls you once bowed to, you don't just liberate yourself, you send a signal. To every man still trapped, a silent roar. You are more than your fear. You are more than your failures. And everything you ever wanted waits on the other side of your own hesitation. Because the only real enemy is the line you refuse to cross. And the only real prison is the one you still believe in. Obstacles are not interruptions, they are instructions. Every wall you hit is information you could not have gathered standing still. When Marcus Aurelius said, "What stands in the way becomes the way," he wasn't handing you poetry, he was handing you architecture. Systems thinkers call it feedback loops. The idea that friction reveals where the system fails, where the structure bends, where your model breaks. If you are willing to study the obstacle, you gain a map no classroom could provide. But if you run from it, you lose the coordinates to your own evolution. Every resistance point you encounter is a hand reaching out from the dark, offering you an update to your operating system. Every limitation is a diagnostic. It doesn't say, "Stop." It says, "Fix this." It doesn't say, "You're not enough." It says, "Here's the gap you must close." When you start seeing limits this way, they stop feeling like punishments. They are construction sites. And every man serious about greatness builds where lesser men crumble. The mind addicted to comfort interprets friction as rejection. It thinks, "This wasn't meant for me." It thinks, "If it's hard, it's wrong." But the mind trained in systems thinking sees friction as signal. It asks, what part of me is underdeveloped? What part of my system needs reinforcement? Instead of despair, it leans in, it refines, it rebuilds. It becomes anti-fragile, stronger because of the blows, not in spite of them. Limits are not random barriers, they are precision instruments. They measure your current load-bearing capacity. They measure your bandwidth for chaos, complexity, and consequence. They tell you exactly how much reality you can handle. No guesswork, no opinion, just data. And that data, if read correctly, can launch you farther than any effortless success. Because if you know where your ceiling truly lies, you can engineer the demolition. Breaking limits is an engineering problem, not an emotional one. It is about pattern recognition. Where do you quit? Where do you flinch? Where does the process break down? Each failure leaves a footprint. Each hesitation marks an untrained muscle. If you're willing to diagnose instead of dramatize, every setback becomes a case study. Every collapsed venture becomes a prototype for the next. Progress stops being magical, it becomes mechanical. There is no shame in hitting a wall, only in pretending the wall isn't there. Only in blaming the architect instead of becoming one yourself. Because if you see the obstacle clearly, you can redesign yourself around it. You can pour new foundations, you can reroute the circuits, you can make sure that when you charge again, the wall doesn't just crack, It collapses under the weight of your upgraded assault. This is why comfort addicts remain trapped. They mistake initial resistance for final resistance. They don't read the data. They don't redesign the system. They just reroute to easier terrain. And every time they do, they teach their mind that obstacles are dead ends, not blueprints. So their life shrinks, their tolerance for chaos withers, and they remain forever small. Not because they lacked opportunity, but because they refuse to use their pain as parchment. To master's limits isn't fearless, he's forensic. He treats failure like a scientist treats an explosion, not as devastation, but as data. He digs into the ashes. He traces the cracks. He reverse engineers the collapse until he knows exactly what reinforcement to install next. His setbacks are not graves, they are schematics. And every time he rebuilds, he outgrows the man who fell. So, next time the wall rises, do not curse it. Catalog it. Study its texture. Measure its thickness, analyze its placement, because that wall, so permanent in your emotions, is temporary in your blueprint. It was placed there to reveal where you are not yet ready. Not to shame you, to shape you, not to stop you, to sharpen you. You are not born finished. You are not handed a fixed self and told to survive. Your brain reconfigures until your final breath. It rewires not based on dreams, but on repetition. Every choice you make leaves a fingerprint on your neural architecture. Every action is a hammer stroke shaping the cathedral or the cage you live in. This is the brutal beauty of plasticity. You can either become a masterpiece or a mausoleum. No third option. And every day you spend tolerating the version of yourself you pretend is permanent, you deny your greatest weapon, the ability to become new. Existentialists were right when they said freedom is a burden. Freedom forces you to confront the raw truth that you are the sculptor of your soul, not your past, not your trauma, not your genetics. You. No excuses, no shield. The clay is wet in your hands whether you like it or not, and if you refuse to mold it, gravity will, time will, society will. You will not escape being shaped. You will only lose the power to shape yourself. That is the weight of freedom. Total accountability for the shape you take. Breaking limits, then, is not a one-time event. It is an act of existential audacity, repeated daily. It is the refusal to let yesterday's circuitry dictate today's reach. It is the rebellion against the comforting lie that this is just who I am. It is waking up every morning and re-entering the forge willingly. It is grabbing the tools, awareness, effort, precision, and hammering a better shape out of whatever raw material you are handling. Some days you bend metal, some days you burn, but you never stop forging. Neuroplasticity is not kind. It is ruthless. It rewards whatever you repeat. Complacency, fear, distraction. Practice them long enough and the brain will optimize for failure. It will smooth the path toward decay. It will make quitting a reflex. But repeat courage, precision, execution, and the brain will sculpt itself into a weapon. Not because it loves you, but because it obeys whatever master you appoint. You see, it adapts without mercy. You are either evolving by design or by neglect. You don't just break limits once, you break them until you die. You fracture the ceiling today, tomorrow it calcifies higher, so you swing again and again. There is no summit where you get to rest. The climb is the existence. Freedom demands you rewire, not because you are broken, but because every sunrise resets the terms of the battle. Every victory decays unless fortified by another. This is why most people drift into mediocrity. They thought one breakthrough would save them forever. It never does. Every excuse you cling to rewires your brain for retreat. Every friction point you dodge programs you to associate difficulty with doom. Over time, the brain stops offering you the hard path at all. It removes the option. It edits reality to fit your cowardice, until you forget you ever had a choice. That is the slow, silent death most call getting older. It is not aging that kills greatness. It is the surrender of plasticity, the willingness to fossilize when you were meant to remain molten. The man who understands plasticity guards his rituals like a fortress. He knows what repetition costs. He knows that every undisciplined day writes corrupted code into his operating system. He knows that every decision is neuro-architecture in motion. So he moves with precision. He trains his brain to crave what stretches him, to find pleasure not in relief, but in conquest, to find identity not in arrival, but in continual ascent. His life does not shrink with time. It sharpens. It deepens. It becomes a cathedral built from the raw agony of constant self-reinvention. You cannot be free and safe simultaneously. Safety seeks permanence. Freedom demands risk. To break limits is to court the chaos of self-overhaul willingly. It is to stare into the abyss of who you were yesterday and say, "Today I betray you for a better future." It is to love potential more than comfort. It is to feel fear and move anyway. It is to understand that the absence of limits is not paradise. It is death. Limits give shape to greatness, the way mountains give meaning to the climb. Plasticity is brutal because it never ends. Every day you are a construction site. Every day you either reinforce the cathedral or collapse into rubble. Every conversation, every workout, every distraction, every action lays brick or swings a wrecking ball. There is no neutrality, only motion, only pattern, only rewiring. And the more you honor that responsibility, you become self-crited. You become the force that shapes the horizon instead of the driftwood carried by it. Memory is not a library, it's a forge. We do not record experiences, we reconstruct them, and the raw material we use is emotion. Whatever emotion is tied to the event, the mind wraps around it like steel around fire. Fearful moments become larger than life. Victories bathed in pride grow into legends. Failures soaked in shame become cemented as proof of identity. This is why effort feels heavier than it should, because somewhere along the timeline, effort got chained to exhaustion, humiliation, futility, and your brain, faithful servant that it is, built a fortress around that association. But, like any fortress, it can be dismantled, brick by brick. Effort alone doesn't crush you. It's the emotion you learn to attach to it. If you learn to associate effort with pain, you avoid it. If you learn to associate effort with pride, you pursue it. And the human tragedy is that most never re-examine the initial emotional anchoring. They simply accept it as law. They believe the first emotional scar was the final word on the matter. They carry it into every project, every discipline, every dream, and wonder why they flinch at the first sign of real work. The secret is hidden in plain sight. You don't need to erase your memories, you need to rewrite their emotional coding. You need to teach your nervous system that effort is not a graveyard, it's a coronation. That strain is not punishment, it's passage. You do this not by thinking differently, but by moving differently when the moment of effort arises, by smiling at the discomfort, by celebrating the repetition, by linking the very chemical release of dopamine not to the outcome, but to the act of striving itself, and rewire the reward system, and the memories follow. Because the brain doesn't store reality, it stores emotional gravity. If you can make the weight of effort feel lighter, more noble, more electric, the brain reprocesses every future act of discipline as desirable, and when that happens, identity shifts without force. You don't have to battle yourself anymore. You move toward the grind the way a river moves toward gravity, naturally, relentlessly, without hesitation. This is how the outliers are born. Not through more willpower, not through magic genetics, but through emotional transmutation. They feel differently about hard work than the rest of the world does. To them, challenge is not assault, it's invitation. Effort is not a cost, it's a prize. Every rep, every hour, every silent sacrifice, a trophy earned in private before any public validation arrives. They built this not through affirmations, but through brutal, deliberate, emotional rewiring. Your story of effort is your cage or your catapult. If effort equals pain in your mind, you will spend a lifetime dodging your own greatness. You will rationalize it, you will decorate it with clever language, but you will feel the hollowness every night before you sleep. The regret that echoes louder than any excuse you crafted during the day. That ache will not be cured by softness. It will only be cured by reclaiming the emotional meaning you assign to work. Most people wait for the world to make effort feel good. They wait for applause, for validation, for visible progress. But by then it's too late. The brain already recorded the negative association. The cement has already dried. The only way to win is to assign new emotional meaning immediately, to celebrate strain before the reward comes, to anchor pride not to victory, but to action, to rewire the soul at the source, not at the ceremony. And here's the paradox. Once you truly love the feeling of effort, before it looks glamorous, before it feels easy, you become untouchable. The world no longer controls your energy. The scoreboard no longer dictates your mood. You become sovereign because you decoupled your ambition from external reward. You linked it directly to motion itself. Now every step forward is a victory. Every grind is an affirmation, and every limit becomes an opportunity to feel alive instead of defeated. This is not mindset work, this is memory warfare. Every time you smile at resistance, you steal territory back from the lies your brain learned years ago. Every time you lean into effort, you reroute history. You amputate the chains of old emotional anchors and replace them with lightning rods that fuel your ascent. Over time, the scars don't vanish, but they sing a different song. A song of strength, a hymn of endurance, a battle cry only those who broke themselves open could ever recognize. Performance graphs do not reward the impatient, they punish them. At first, every drop of sweat feels wasted. Every hour invested feels stolen by silence. You show up, you grind, and nothing moves, nothing shifts. Your mind screams for evidence, your heart begs for signs, but the graph mocks you with a flat line. This is where the many fall. They believe growth should be visible. They believe input and output should hold hands. They believe effort should reward them like a vending machine. And when it doesn't, they collapse into resentment, unaware that they were inches from ignition. Exponential growth is a cruel teacher. It demands belief when no proof exists. It demands discipline when no reward is visible. It demands loyalty to a future self you have never met. Most people quit not because the dream was impossible, but because they could not survive the necessary season of invisibility. They could not bear to move mountains in the dark, to carry weight with no applause. to invest when no return could yet be seen. Their faith was transactional, their hunger conditional, and so they perished at the gates of compounding. The first 99% of mastery feels like death. You will lift more than you think you can. You will fight longer than you think you should. You will stretch farther than your mind tells you is reasonable. And the world will look away. It will not notice. It will not celebrate. Because exponential curves do not reward early efforts visibly. They store them, they compound them in silence, deep beneath the surface of perception, until the graph detonates upward. And by then, only the survivors remain to harvest the momentum.